Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And good morning, Instagram fam, friends and followers of as-Saafiy. And welcome to another episode of Revert Reflections. So today, brothers and sisters, we will begin a series of reflections on relationships. Relationships, brothers and sisters, are so impactful in life generally and in faith specifically. A relationship and the people that we allow ourselves to become close to, the people we allow into our lives, can completely alter the trajectory of our lives in both material and immaterial ways. Take, for example, the relationship between the spouses, between husbands and wives. Spouses wield a tremendous amount of influence over each other. And I think a lot of us don't realize, especially when we're about to get married to someone, how a person can affect us and change who we are without us fully realizing it because of the closeness, the proximity that they occupy. To the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He stated that some spouses can actually be enemies of their spouses, spiritual enemies, preventing their partner from doing good, encouraging them to do evil, discouraging them from going above and beyond, and doing the things that will draw them even closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or encouraging them to leave off things, to abandon things, to belittle things, to downplay things that are sins, that will push them further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they encourage them to not be mindful of those things, just stick to the basics, etc. So sometimes the spouse can totally discourage you from being good, and sometimes they will cause you to minimize goodness, to do less good, and to be less keen to avoid evil. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to when He says, in the Quran, He says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, inna min azwajikum wa awladikum aduwwan lakum, fahdharuhum. He says, O you who believe, indeed, some of your spouses and children are enemies to you, so beware of them. And that comes from Surah At-Taghabun, the 64th chapter of the Quran, verse number 14. And famously, a man by the name of Imran ibn Hitan. He was a scholar and a poet from the early period. And just to show you how much of a learned person he was, he narrated a hadith. He narrated a hadith from Aisha, from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, and from Ibn Abbas. He was a narrator of hadith who sat in the circles and sat at the feet and took knowledge from some of the greatest companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This Imran ibn Hitan, he was a Sunni scholar. He was a person who practiced the Sunnah, followed orthodox Sunni Islam, during a time when a group called the Khawarij, the Kharijites, had emerged. And this is a group of extremists. We won't go into the details about what they believe, but they were a group of extremists with very extreme beliefs, and they at times would become very violent, and they would encourage violence, particularly against the Muslim rulers and the ruling class of society. Al-Muhim, Imran ibn Hitan, he became interested in a woman who was from the Khawarij. And he was discouraged by some of his friends, saying, don't marry her. You shouldn't marry a woman from that group with those beliefs and that type of behavior, that type of perspective on Islam. You don't want to do that. But he said, you know what? I'm going to marry her and I'll convert her to the truth. I'll convert her to the Sunnah. So he married her. But instead of him converting her to the Sunnah, she converted him to the way of the Khawarij. He became from the leaders of the Khawarij. And this is an example of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying when He says, indeed, some of your wives and children can be enemies for you, so beware of them. And it shows you, it underscores the practical impact of relationships, particularly this relationship, on our lives. It can totally alter the trajectory of our lives. Psychologists and experts from the secular perspective, they talk ad nauseum about the importance of removing toxic people from our lives and the impact that that has on our mental health and well-being. How when we have toxic people in our lives and in our circles, how those toxic people can make us insecure. They can make us question our self-worth. They can make us a mental, an emotional, and psychological mess. And so it's important to remove those people from our lives. So we have all of these incentives. But beyond these obvious incentives for being mindful of our relationships, in our religion, we are taught that true faith is inseparably linked, inseparably tied to associations. That true faith can ultimately be made or broken depending on the people with whom we associate. One example of this is from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, who said, "Man ahabba lillah, wa abghada lillah, wa wala lillah, wa aada lillah, innama tunalu wilayatullahi bidhalik. Walan yajida al-abdu طعم الإيمان وإن كثر صلاته وصومه حتى يكون كذلك." He said, he who loves for Allah and despises for Allah, befriends for Allah's sake, and defriends for Allah's sake. In this way only can one achieve Allah's friendship, nearness and dearness to Allah. No person will ever taste the sweetness of real faith, even if he or she was constant in prayer and fasting, until they are like this, until they love for Allah's sake and hate for Allah's sake. Associate for Allah's sake. Associate with Allah in mind, with nearness to Allah in mind. Disassociate with nearness to Allah in mind. They will never be able to taste the sweetness of faith, even if they were constant in prayer and fasting. So brothers and sisters, in the coming days, with this backdrop and after providing this context, in the coming days, we hope to talk about specific relationships and how to navigate those relationships to get the most out of our faith. And this is important for us, those of us who have reverted to Islam, who have converted to Islam, become Muslims. And we have all these relationships which are carried over from before we were Muslim, or those of us who are becoming committed Muslims. We're born Muslims. We inherited Islam. But now we're making the active choice to be committed to Islam. And we have all of these relationships carried over from the time when we weren't committed. How do we navigate all of that? How do we navigate that and make sure that we're not allowing people into our lives who are affecting us negatively spiritually? This is what we're going to talk about, inshallah ta'ala, in the coming sessions. And we hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless us to have a very productive discussion of these topics and allow us to use this discussion to become better Muslims. Until then, brothers and sisters, as always, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless your houses, to bless your spouses, to bless your children, to bless what remains of your day, to bless you and make you blessed wherever you may be, to shower you with His blessings and surround you with His protection. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.